Look at some things now from Reveal. A Reveal is about your congregation's spiritual health and practices in terms of its own ministry. It's a composite of everything that people said. 89 people in your congregation answered responses. That's really good. It's over 50% of your average worship attendance. Okay? You break 50%, you got a very representative sample. And the people who answer questions on something like Reveal are always active people. So the people are speaking out of experience. It's not like, well, we got a bunch of the people who don't come much to tell us what they think. No, you don't really care what they think too much about your core stuff because they actually don't know. People who show up have to tell you how you're doing. People who don't show up can tell you other things, but not this. So it's a composite. You answered things, and the things you answered had to do with your personal beliefs, how you understand the theology of the church, the practices that you carry out in terms of your own prayer life, Bible reading, study, conversations, and serving, and then your congregation's practices. How do we work collectively to cultivate these things? And what Reveal is trying to look at is your congregation's spiritual vitality and the relationship between what your congregation is doing and the spiritual vitality of each of the individuals who are part of it. Okay? So, for example, some of you are on fire for Jesus. Some of you aren't. Some of you are on fire for Jesus because of certain things that happened in this church that have helped to cultivate it, intentionality of love. Others are on fire for Jesus in spite of what the congregation does, and you've done it some other way. All kinds of different, there's a wide variety of things. But what we're going to look at when we see your results in a minute are the things that you've reported collectively as a congregation. And as a congregation, your congregation looks just like it's probably part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. That would be the profile. If I was to look at your profile and say, what denomination is this church? I would say it looks like an ELCA Lutheran Church. You look very much like an ELCA Lutheran Church. Now, that should not surprise you, since you are an ELCA Lutheran Church, but it may depress you because ELCA Lutheran churches aren't doing very well. Okay? We're shrinking about 3% per year. Last year, 43,000 people stopped worshiping on a regular basis in the LCA. 2 years ago was the first time we had under 1 million people in worship collectively in the history of the LCA. We're losing about 40,000 a year.
Is that, what about the other synods?
Missouri Synod? They're shrinking too. We're shrinking faster than Missouri Synod though. The LCA is the whitest church in America, denominationally. We're about 3 to 4% people of color. We're one of the fastest shrinking. Presbyterians, Episcopalians, Lutherans, and Methodists are 4 of the fastest shrinking. They're also all full communion partners. So we only hang out with people who don't have anything to offer. That's kind of our rule. You have to be like us to hang out, because if you can teach us something, we don't want to be in communion. So we're still struggling to build relationships with people who are more vibrant. But there's a pattern. Mainline churches in general, which the LCA is part of, in general, mainline churches are declining. And they're declining because they've been institutionally strong and spiritually weak for a long time. They haven't cultivated discipleship and transformation as much as they've cultivated strong things. Tim?
How are the Catholics doing?
Catholics are not doing much better. They're doing a little better because of immigration. Most of the people who have been immigrating to the U.S. For the last 20 years have come from Latin America and Eastern Europe, which are heavily Catholic areas. So if you take out immigration, the Catholic Church is shrinking, and it's people who've been here a long time, but it's been able to import people from immigration patterns. That's started to slow down dramatically. Latin American immigration is a lot slower than it was. Net immigration, in spite of all the wall stuff, net immigration to Mexico is negative right now. More people are moving back to Mexico than coming in from Mexico. Because economy's better, the environment's more hostile here. So the Catholic Church is stalling on Hispanic a little bit, but Eastern Europeans, the former Iron Curtain countries, Poland, for example, a lot of Polish immigrants are really Catholic. So Catholic Church has been kind of flat, numerically, because of immigration, but only because it's had people moving here. You know, as we said, Norwegians, Swedes, Germans, Denmark, they're not sending people here. Go ahead.
What about churches in the Southern Hemisphere and in the Third World?
Developing countries and some Southern Hemisphere churches are growing in general. Christianity is still flourishing. In Africa, Christianity is flourishing and growing. Central and South America growing. And surprisingly, in Central and South America, it's the Pentecostal churches that are beginning to grow. Catholic churches in Latin America are fairly flat. Mainline kinds of churches like Lutherans and Presbyterians are growing a little in Central and South, but Pentecostal churches, the charismatic churches in Mexico, and evangelical Pentecostals are growing the fastest. And that's true in the United States. And it scares Lutherans, but evangelical Pentecostals are actually the most diverse churches in America. You know, if you look at homogeneous kinds of churches, they tend to be Lutheran, Presbyterian, Episcopal, Methodist, mainline churches. And if you want to find a diverse church ethnically especially, it's probably going to be Pentecostal. Which probably doesn't surprise us because that's what Pentecost was about, all that kind of chaos, but also people of all lands and tongues. But Pentecostals are blowing us away in many parts of the world. And they're also blowing us away some in the United States, and they're starting to have a lot to offer. The old Pentecostal notion of a storefront, kind of poor person, uneducated, and we don't want anything to do with them, starting to change. As second, third generation Pentecostals, education levels are getting higher, and their ability to interact across ethnic lines is much better than ours. So we actually should start hanging out with Pentecostals. Even if we don't want to be Pentecostals directly, there's a lot they can teach us. But Southern Hemisphere, booming. Christianity is majority south of the equator now. The north of the equator is a minority. That's a big change. Okay, let's move to this. The Reveal thing started with a church called Willow Creek. And Willow Creek, any of you familiar with Willow Creek? Big church. I live less than 10 miles from Willow Creek. Like 20,000 people. Now they've got 5 campuses. And the one they just built in one of the communities looks like their main campus. It's just huge. I saw pictures of, wow, how did they do that? It's amazing. But they were a big and effective church, they thought. And they wanted to assess some things. And when they started to assess things, they developed this tool that eventually became the Reveal tool. They surveyed all their people around their spiritual health, discipleship, kind of things. And Willow Creek had assumed that getting people involved in church made good Christians. That's a basic assumption that we've had in Lutherans and mainline churches. People who go to church are good Christians. You attend regularly, you're a good Christian. What they discovered was shocking. People who went to Willow Creek were not good Christians. They didn't read their Bible, they didn't pray, they didn't serve any differently than people who didn't go to church. They were church-going people, and they had certain things that they did within the life of the church, but it hadn't really overflowed and impacted their lives very much. So Lutherans rejoiced at this, because Lutherans who'd been very envious of how big Willow Creek was, said, ha! Mile wide and an inch deep. Ha! We knew it all along, you big, glitzy, splashy people. Then, after they did that, what was really amazing was the senior pastor, Bill Hybels, got up and had a big leadership conference that they sponsor every year, which now is satellited, has about 400,000 participants a year. It's the largest leadership conference, secular or religious, in the world, and quite good. At a leadership conference, Bill Hybels got up and said, we want to thank you for being here and trusting your learning and leadership development to some of the things we share with you. And we want to tell you, to start with, that a lot of what we taught you last year was wrong. That we misled you. Not on purpose, we just didn't know what we were doing. And we had built a big church that was a mile wide and an inch deep, and we didn't know it. And now we've learned this, and we're going to be changing a lot of things about how we do church. Well, my respect for Bill Hybels went up like a gazillion %. That a guy would get up on the stage in front of a whole bunch of people and just come that clean about telling the truth. Wow, amazing. And then Willow Creek has overhauled its ministry in response to this, and is a much different church today than it was 12 years ago when they had this insight. It's amazing. In fact, Bill Hybels is just retiring, and he's a Reformed Church in America background. It's a sort of a conservative evangelical church, but pretty moderate. And their new senior pastor is a woman. A woman lead pastor for a mega church of 20,000 people. Very cutting edge. But they went through an overhaul. So when you see your results, I'll just tell you now, your results aren't going to look very good. And your first temptation is going to be to go, well, there must be something wrong with the test. Well, Willow Creek went through the same experience, and everybody goes through this. We've done this with a lot of Lutheran churches. Trust the results, they're mostly from you. This is what you said about yourselves and what you reported. And don't feel any compulsion to to defend them or attack them. Just listen to them. And as you listen to them, think about what they're saying, because really what they're doing is saying what you said. It's really important that when you do something like this, that you think about your report like a mirror. So I'm going to put the report on the screen, and I'll have to change just a second. Here we go. And as we walk through this, your screen is very small, and your projector resolution is very not fine-tuned. So one of the things you're going to see on these slides a little bit is you can't read everything. Don't feel like there's anything you can do about it or that I can do about it. You've got a small screen, your projector resolution is not very tight, so the smaller print, I'll just tell you what's going to say where it's important. Okay? But you'll see graphs and patterns, and those patterns are going to be very obvious. So when we start looking at this, and let me see if I can magnify this as much as I can. Come on now.
And for those who that is important, that they have copies that they can look at, I will make them available after we've gone through
This is
this.
called executive summary, and actually we can probably take that PDF and put it on the website. You can look at it on your own computer at home, print some out, you can look at it. It's accessible. I don't want you to get caught in the micro details anyway. We're visioning today. The bottom line is you're going to see colors across the way. These kind of burgundy color on the left of this bottom bar, anytime you see burgundy, that means it's way below average. Sometimes that's a good thing, but usually it's a bad thing. The kind of orangey yellow means below average, the kind of light yellow means average, light blue means above average, and the dark blue means well above average. And you'll see all of these scattered throughout the data, and they'll help us to understand what things are. This is your age curve. I'll just read that. This is the top one is like young adults. It's really short. It's maybe insightful, maybe not, but you probably know there's not a lot of people under age 29 here, right? So 2% of the people who took your test did that. That means basically you have 2 people under age 30 take the survey, okay? The next bar is up to 50, still pretty short, still well below average. And the next one is dark blue, that's over 50, way above average. What it's telling you, very quickly, you're an older than average church. Not a surprise probably, but that's what it's saying. You had very few young adults, well below average, even middle adults, and over 50 was the vast majority. So we know that you're an aging church. That's a typical ELC thing, typical ELC church, average middle person is in their 60s. So you're kind of normal for Lutherans, not normal for churches across the country. This is compared to all churches, not just Lutherans. Here, when you start looking at your data, you'll start to see some breakdowns. Oh, my glasses on here. What you're going to see here, and I won't go through all the things, but those categories have to do with people who've been here less than a year, up to 5 to 10, and more than 10. What you'll see is a lot of your people have been here a long time. You've got more people here who've been here longer than an average church. So your turnover is not as high. But you don't have a lot of new people comparatively. So the number of people who took this, most of them have been here more than 10 years. Okay? So that's just, again, kind of true. Also means a lot of people know your church pretty well. So the results here are pretty good. But you're an older and more stable church. Your total score came out to 51, and that's a composite of 3 things. The 3 things on the bottom left are the church's role. This is what your congregation does to cultivate spiritual practices. What does your church do in this area? The one on the top are your personal spiritual practices. This is what are you each individually doing? How are you reporting your own sense of Bible study and prayer and devotion and conversation, all those kind of things. The one on the right, called faith in action, that's what are you doing out in the world about it? How does this impact your job, your family, service in the community, volunteering, all those kinds of things. So it's a 3-legged stool. Bottom left, what's our church doing to help us? Top one, what are we doing ourselves? And bottom right, how's this being lived out in terms of service? What you'll see is your church's role is below average. Your church is contributing at the moment less than an average church to helping you in your spiritual development. Okay? Your personal practices are well below average. You personally are doing even less. And most of you aren't doing or reporting much about personal spiritual practices and cultivating your own spiritual life. That individually you're not taking a lot of effort or responsibility, okay? And on the right faith and action, you're average in terms of service, which is actually quite amazing since your church collectively and you individually are all below average in your practices. And this is the thing that we've seen